The Celestial Lounge wasn't the kind of establishment Emperor Thaxiron normally frequented. Nestled in the lower districts of the orbital station Meridian 7, it catered to traders, mercenaries, and the occasional diplomat seeking anonymity. But tonight, the most powerful being in the Krillian Empire sat in a corner booth. His azure scales dimmed beneath a hooded cloak, watching his son stare at an untouched glass of Arcturian whiskey. Prince Velcor hadn't spoken in 3 cycles. Not since the incident. The physicians had examined him thoroughly. No physical damage to his vocal cords, no neurological trauma they could detect. Yet the young prince, once known for his eloquent speeches and sharp wit, had been reduced to silence. Thaxiron had exhausted every resource in the Empire. Telepaths, technology, ancient rituals. Nothing had worked. Your Highness, his chief advisor had suggested earlier that day, perhaps what the prince needs is not a cure, but acceptance. Let him see that silence need not be isolation. So here they sat, father and son in a bar filled with the chatter of a dozen alien species, surrounded by the very noise that highlighted Velcor's imprisonment. The human waitress appeared so suddenly that Thaxiron's hand instinctively moved to his concealed weapon. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, barely 2 centuries since first contact, and their unpredictability was legendary among the older races. "What can I get you, gentlemen?" she asked, her voice carrying that peculiar musical quality humans possessed. Her name tag read, Sarah, in universal script. Thaxiron ordered for both of them with a curt nod, expecting her to leave. Instead, Sarah's eyes settled on Velcor and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps, though not of his identity. The prince sat rigidly, his golden eyes fixed on the table, his hands clenched. The Emperor recognized the signs. His son was struggling with the weight of silence, the inability to engage with the world as he once had. Then Sarah did something that made Thaxiron's blood freeze. She raised her hands and began to move them in deliberate, flowing patterns. Her fingers danced through the air, forming shapes and gestures that seemed to carry meaning beyond mere movement. And impossibly, incredibly, Velcor's head snapped up, his eyes widening. The prince's hands trembled as they rose from the table. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, he began to mirror some of her gestures, adding his own. Sarah's face broke into a radiant smile, and she responded with more hand movements, faster now, more complex. Thaxiron watched in stunned silence as his son, his mute, unreachable son, engaged in what could only be described as a conversation. Velcor's golden eyes shone with an intensity the Emperor hadn't seen in months. The prince's gestures became more animated, more expressive, and Sarah matched him beat for beat. After several minutes, Sarah placed a hand over her heart and nodded to Velcor before disappearing into the kitchen. The prince turned to his father, and for the first time since the incident, something like hope flickered across his features. "What?" Thaxiron began, but Velcor was already gesturing, his hands moving with desperate urgency. The Emperor of the Krillian Empire, ruler of 400 worlds, conqueror of the Sigma rebellions, had absolutely no idea what his son was trying to tell him. Sarah returned, carrying their drinks and a small data pad. She set the beverages down and offered the pad to Thaxiron. "Your son just told me that he's felt trapped since losing his voice," she said gently, "that everyone treats him like he's broken, like he's less than what he was. He says he still has so much to say, but no way to say it." Thaxiron stared at the human, his scales rippling with emotion. "You understood all that? How?" "Sign language," Sarah explained. "On Earth, we've used it for thousands of years. It's a complete language system used by our deaf and mute communities." She smiled at Velcor. "He's a natural, actually. Picked up the basics in just minutes." "But he was gesturing in ways I've never seen," Thaxiron protested. "Because I don't know your species' sign language. You probably don't have one. So we were improvising, creating a pigeon language on the fly. Humans are good at that." She turned to Velcor and gestured again. The prince responded enthusiastically. "He's asking if I can teach him properly," Sarah translated. "He wants to learn everything." Thaxiron felt something crack in his chest, the wall he'd built around his fear for his son. "Would you?" "I'll pay whatever you ask. Provide whatever resources you need." Sarah laughed, that peculiar human sound that always seemed to contain more emotion than any Krillian vocalization. "I'm a waitress, not a teacher, but I can connect you with the Terran Institute for the Deaf. They've been working on adapting sign language for non-human species. She paused, studying the Emperor with surprising shrewdness. Though something tells me you have the resources to bring their best instructors to you. Over the next hour, Thaxiron watched his son come alive. Sarah taught them basic signs explaining the grammar and structure. Velcor absorbed everything with a hunger that broke his father's heart. The prince's hands, so still and useless for months, became instruments of expression. When it was time to leave, Velcor signed something elaborate to Sarah. She grinned and signed back. "What did he say?" Thaxiron asked. "He said thank you for giving him his voice back." Sarah replied softly. "I told him he never lost it. He just needed a different way to speak." As they left the Celestial Lounge, Thaxiron placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Velcor looked up at him and signed something simple, something Sarah had taught him in the first few minutes. The Emperor didn't need a translation. The gesture was universal enough, the emotion behind it clear. "I love you too, my son," Thaxiron thought, making a mental note to learn every sign, every gesture, every nuance of this human language because humanity, he was beginning to understand, didn't just survive their challenges. They created entire languages around them, built communities, found beauty in difference. They didn't see silence as an ending, but as a different kind of beginning. And perhaps, Thaxiron thought as Velcor's hands moved excitedly, already practicing the signs he'd learned, that was humanity's true genius. Not their technology or their warfare or their tenacity, but their stubborn refusal to let anyone be truly voiceless, even princes. Even in the vast silence of space, even his son.